Okay, and I'm going to turn on live transcript here. All right, live transcript is on. So if you want to enable that, there should be a button on the bottom to click to make that happen. And as a reminder, all these sessions will be recorded. As you saw at the end of after last session, I will send them to you afterwards, right? Probably via YouTube link. I find that I just can't bring myself to trust Zoom's web-based streaming platform for recording. So I like to do some editing, and that's just me though. So welcome back, everyone. Great to see you all here on this lovely Friday afternoon here in the Mid-Atlantic District of Columbia. It is sunny. I hope it is sunny where you are too, or at least will be maybe soon. And I know many of you recently had spring break or are maybe on spring break. So I hope you've also had a chance to rest, recover, and I appreciate you being here with all of us, especially if it's your spring break right now. So welcome back. Raise your hand or show yourself in some way. Anyone who wasn't here last time. Okay, a couple. Mindy, Jessica, welcome. Everybody, wave at Mindy and Jessica. Hi, Mindy and Jessica, welcome to session 2 of a 4-part series, the Advocacy Chapter Organizing School. It's all very exciting. Everyone give a thumbs up. It's very exciting, right? Everyone who's done it? All right, awesome, cool. These are all paid crisis actors that I've brought in today. That's not that funny. All right, so I'm going to share my screen now. So welcome to session 2. And if in case you don't know or forgot, that's me. I'm Mike McGee. I'm an organizer with AAUP National. You can always reach me at my email address that is posted right there, mmcgee@aaup.org. But before we go any further, a pop quiz. I'm going to make you suffer as you make your students suffer. We're going to quiz you on your retention of knowledge from last time. I'm going to post a poll. All right. So question 1, feel free to work through them at your own pace. For those of you who weren't here last time, you'll get some extra. Your grade will be curved. So. And you may need to expand the size of the poll window in case some of the answers are cut off. Okay, just a few more seconds to get your answers in. You're out of lifelines. It's the $1 million question. National television, everyone will laugh at you. You'll go down in history. YouTube clips will be made about you as a hero or as a fool. I'm just kidding. Laying it on a little thick. All right, so let's end the poll here. What do we got? So for question 1, what is the main difference between mobilizing and organizing? All right, a little bit of disagreement here. Most people thought that mobilizing focuses on turning out your current members to take action, while organizing emphasizes recruiting new members. And a few thought that organizing is about leveraging access and expertise to key decision makers, while mobilizing is about recruiting new members. The correct answer is C. C, so most of you got it right. The reason D is incorrect is because advocacy is the form of collective action or chapter work that emphasizes expertise and access of a small number of people, right? Which is the habit a lot of us find ourselves in, right? Or the structural kind of constraints that we find ourselves in. For question 2, what are the 3 most common types of advocacy chapters? The correct answer is B. So again, congratulations. Most of the class was correct. Watchdog, faculty voice, and organizing. Okay, and those are not like ideal. Those are not natural forms, right? That just exist out there that we can point to and measure. Those are archetypes of chapters that myself and others at National have noticed over the years, basically. Right? Though some may have been bad and ugly, and I appreciate that. And finally, what are we doing today? Well, what we're doing today is issue identification. Okay, we're going to get to faculty outreach and strategic planning in future sessions, but our primary, in fact, our obsessive focus today is going to be on identifying and organizing issues. Which is why I had us begin with the question, if you could wave a magic wand, what is one thing you would change about your life as faculty? Because that is the question we need to be asking our colleagues. Okay, either literally or a version of that question. Because today what we're going to be talking about is how to move from problems, right? Everybody's got problems, okay? But how do we go from problems to campaigns, right? How do we take all these things that are out there that are causing faculty suffering, issues that arise, and how do we move from that? How do we move from, you know, just the general sense of outrage or the sense of outrage that faculty have about their working conditions, about their students' learning conditions, and how do we turn those into campaigns, right? What's really step one? Because as a good friend of mine at the George Mason University AAUP chapter once said, we had to go from a, quote, wine and wine chapter where faculty just get together, drink, and complain, to actually doing something about it, okay? And that's a really tough hurdle to get over, but that's what we're going to be focused on here today. So there's three major objectives for today's training. First, you are all, if all goes well, if everything goes according to plan, you will all walk away with a potential organizing issue in hand. And I'll say more about what that means as we get started here, okay? But that's the mission, is that you can all go back to your campuses today with a rough idea of a possible organizing issue. You will also understand what makes a good organizing issue. Not all issues are made equally. Part of our job as chapter leaders is to make judgment calls about which problems to try to solve, because we can't solve everything as much as we would like to, okay? And there's always going to be more problems, right? But how do we pick and choose? How do we decide among competing priorities? And finally, we will begin thinking strategically. That the focus of next training, next month, will be about strategic planning as such. But today we're going to start thinking in that direction. Okay, so those of you who put strategic planning down as the topic for today, you weren't entirely wrong. You get partial credit. So if we accomplish these three objectives, we should be satisfied and declare victory for the weekend. To achieve these objectives, here's today's agenda. We're going to start with a review of session one. Then I'm going to ask you all, what's your problem, right? What is your problem? No, but what are the problems your faculty face on campus? Okay, we're going to talk about what it is, what's the difference between problems and issues, okay, and how do we identify shared problems? Then we're going to talk about how to move from problems to issues. How do we go from problems that are out there to actual campaigns and things that we can organize around? And I'll talk at length the distinction between those two terms. We'll then have a breakout room. There's going to be two pretty lengthy breakout sessions today. So prepare yourself for small group work. Whatever you got to do, muster your courage to prepare yourself for this, because the main takeaways today are going to be done in a lot of small group activities. So we're going to have one breakout room after problems to issues. Then we're going to talk about engaging faculty in the issue identification process. I will say up front, what we're doing today is not entirely how it should be done, okay? In an ideal world, you would engage faculty in a robust way in the issue identification process. And what we're going to practice today in the work in the small group work is kind of a microcosm of that. So even though you're going to go back to your campus with a potential issue in hand, you should not then dictate to all your faculty, hey, everybody, I went to a 2-hour training, this is what we're doing. Okay, we're going to talk about how to actually use issue identification itself as an opportunity to organize. And then we're going to end today with deciding between competing issues, right? And you all are going to do that work in your small groups. You're going to have to make a judgment call between competing organizing issues so that you settle on one. And again, this is a microcosm. This is artificial, right? This process is probably going to take you much longer than 2 hours, I would imagine, at your own campuses. But today you're going to get practice in the skills of doing it so that you can lead these conversations, discussions, and collaborations back at your institution and with your chapter members. Sound good? All right. So let's do a quick review. I'm gonna breeze through this a bit because you all passed the pop quiz with flying colors, well, most of you. And so we're just gonna touch on some of the main topics. To remind ourselves, the definition of organizing. Organizing is building relationships, building relationships between similarly situated people, converting those relationships into collective power through strategic direct actions to affect the change they desire. Okay? This is the Mike McGee definition of organizing. Okay? There are other definitions out there, but this is, I think, a very useful definition for advocacy chapter organizing especially. It's about bringing people together, building relationships, and then using those relationships to push for things that will make faculty's lives better. Of course, through your chapter as the organizational vehicle that can actually do that work. So, of course, the central truth of organizing is that the way that we make change happen is that we got to build our structure. We got to build our chapters, build our organizations to be strong and cohesive so that we can put pressure on key decision makers to give us what we want. All right, this is a political struggle, right? As much as higher education, from the time you're an undergrad all the way through being a faculty member, encourages and acculturates us to friendly, convivial, collegial relationships, and that's all good and important. When we're talking about power, the administration has the power, right? And faculty need to claw the power back from them because the administration has been doing it for decades now, taking in the reverse, taking away more and more power, taking away more and more ground of what faculty used to have control and power over. Okay, the administration understands this. They understand that this is a battle of power, right? And they're going to play the game of, oh, aren't we just so collegial? We shouldn't, let's all just be nice to each other. While at the same time, completely eviscerating shared governance, slashing tenure track positions, et cetera, and all the horrors we're also familiar with. A bit about what organizing is not. I talked about 2 categories that are often confused for organizing in progressive movements, really for probably the last 60, 70 years. There's advocacy and there's mobilizing. Advocacy is about experts or people with access to key decision makers doing the work. Okay? The model of advocacy is I give money to this organization, and that organization has experts, lawyers, lobbyists, staff, who then go to the key decision makers to do the thing I want them to do. Right? I give money to the Sierra Club because I care about trees. The Sierra Club goes and gets legislation that's good for trees. Right? Advocacy is necessary, especially sometimes at the government level, right? There's no avoiding that, but it's not a good model for building power on campus because it ends up with a small number of faculty, chapter leaders usually, who burn out pretty quickly. I also want to remind folks, please make sure to be muted just to make sure that we can avoid any feedback. The second model, which is an improvement over advocacy, is mobilizing. And mobilizing is about turning out people who already agree with you to do things, to take action. And this is something that a lot of large progressive organizations do all the time, right? How many of you have received a change.org flyer for an event, right? The city council is going to pass this thing. That's horrible. Everybody needs to show up, right? Or we're going to have a march downtown about this thing, right? Show up. Why did you get that change.org message? Well, because you signed something previously, maybe 10 years ago, and got put on a listserv because it indicates that you care about this thing and you already agree with the politics of this organization, right? For anyone who's ever donated money to a political party, you are never getting off that list, right? They are going to be sending you messages till the day you die, and maybe probably after. Okay? And that's mobilizing, is we turn out the true believers to take action. And that's a good thing to do. The problem with mobilizing is that it doesn't actually help us build and grow power on campus. If we're just relying on the same 15 core chapter members to show up and do things, are we actually growing the chapter and recruiting more people? The answer probably is no. Which gets us to what? To organizing. Organizing centers the ordinary rank and file member. They're the ones who are the agents of change. We make change on campus by building a large enough organization that can push for change and compel decision makers to give us what we want. Okay. And organizing isn't just about mobilizing the people who already agree with us. It's about growing that core of people, right? It's about talking to people we've never talked to before. I talk to chapter leaders all the time, and I ask them, well, what's your membership like? I'm like, well, you know, we have 20 or so members. Okay, what departments are they in? Well, they're all in the humanities and social sciences. Okay, have you talked to a chemistry professor? Well, they don't like us in chemistry. How do you know? Have you bothered asking, right? Have you actually gone to their office or called them up and talked to them about AAUP? Okay, that's the distinction of organizing to mobilizing or advocacy. It forces us to get out of our comfort zone and try to recruit people who we aren't sure agree with us, or even talk to people who might even be oppositional to us. Okay? But it's about growing and building power. And then, of course, the 3 types of chapters, right, which we aced so well on the exam. There's watchdogs, which are the small group of faculty who write the position statements, who send the emails, who maybe show up, who, you know, there's a couple of them who are really vocal in Senate. Then there's the faculty voice chapter, which does those things, but also maybe hosts fora, has meetings, updates, and educates faculty about what's going on, tries to come up with alternatives that are then brought back to shared governance channels, and that's all wonderful. But then there's the organizing chapters who do also those things, but then mount campaigns. Okay? They have members in the Senate trying to push for resolutions. They are issuing position statements, but you know what they're also doing? They're also having rallies. They're also doing petitions. They're also contacting lawmakers. They're also talking to alumni and donors because they're trying to push for things to make real change on campus. This was all covered in the last session by review. Hopefully that's obvious. So if for those of you who are only coming to the second or who are new to the second session, I apologize for blasting through this really quickly. I'm happy to answer any questions by email after the fact if you want to review this information, or better yet, if you have a chapter member who was at the first session, you can talk to them. Okay, so that's the review of what organizing is theoretically, how it's distinct from other types of other kinds of collective action, the challenges advocacy chapters often face in building the kind of power necessary and mounting campaigns. That's all stuff we focused on last week, kind of to set the stage. Today, we're going to dive into the real work. I don't know what that noise is, sorry. We're going to start diving into the work of actually building a campaign, right? How do we go from being a watchdog chapter, which if you recall, most of you self-identified as, how do we go from that to actually building power and doing things like issue campaigns? So that's what we're going to start with today. And I want to begin with some terms, some clarifying terms. In the organizing world, there is a distinction between a problem and an issue. Okay? A problem is something that is causing the faculty or any kind of worker to suffer. Okay? That's put a little dramatically, right? You know, suffering. But it's I put that emphasis on it to demonstrate the point, right? Something that is making faculty's lives worse than they should be. Here's some very common examples. Stagnating faculty salaries, right? We haven't gotten a raise in 10 years. Okay, that is a specific thing that is making faculty's lives worse than they should be. There's a weak, enfeebled Senate, or maybe it's been captured by the administration, right? Maybe the Senate leaders, you know, are unfortunately, you know, not willing to stand up to the administration. You have a decline in tenure track positions. Your board is completely corporatized, right? And the list goes on and on. Right? We all, as you will here in a second, identify a bunch of these, right? So those are problems. and we all got problems. An issue, however, in organizing speak, is not a problem. An issue is a solution to a problem. A solution to the problem. So for example, if your campus, if your faculty are facing stagnating salaries, that's a problem. A solution to that problem might be raises. I mean, that's pretty obvious, right? So an issue is raises for faculty. And an issue campaign is a long-term effort to try to win that solution. Okay, so when I say issue campaign, it's very important to make this distinction because I'm going to be saying that word a lot, those words a lot today. An issue campaign refers to an attempt by the chapter to win a specific solution to a problem. Okay. Think about everyone's favorite Vermont politician, Bernie Sanders, right? In his various presidential campaigns. What would you say his primary problem he was trying to address? What was, like, if he was on a stage, what's the #1 problem that he would always bring up? Economics, all right. What about more specific than that? What's, like, if he had 2 seconds on an elevator? Yes, there it is, Mary, healthcare. Yeah. There were other things, of course, too, right? Economics, you know, low wages, etc. But healthcare, that was, I would say, at the core of his campaigns. But he didn't just go around the country saying, gee, doesn't healthcare suck? Boy, this really is a problem. And then walk off the stage, right? No, he would campaign on the solution to the problem. We're going to have Medicare for all, right? Or, you know, other solutions that he would propose. So he didn't just campaign going around the country complaining. He had solutions. Now, of course, whether you thought the solutions made sense or agreed, you know, that's a different question. But my point is that you build campaigns, whether they're political, labor, whatever, around solutions to problems. Even a collective bargaining campaign at a union is not about the contract as such, right? It's about what are the wins, what are the gains we're making in this contract that are solving our problems, right? What are the higher wages, the better healthcare, the grievance process, right? What are the things we're going to get for this contract? Okay. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing for a few minutes. Here's what I want you all to do. For the next 5 minutes, in your notebooks, on your Word, on your iPads, whatever it is in front of you that you can record human writing on, just brain dump. What are all the problems you can think of that faculty face on your campus? Okay. What are, and I'm just go full bore, right? No need to hold back. What are all the problems faculty face on your campus? All right, about another minute and a half, so feel free to keep chugging. Okay, nice work, everyone. I see some folks are still furiously scribbling and typing. That's okay. Also, this is a fun aside. When I uploaded that first video to YouTube, it got copyright struck within the first like minute because of the, I think I had streamed some music at the time. It's still up, but those sections, I think might have lost their audio, so I apologize for that. But okay, so nice work. Does anyone want to volunteer and just read their list quickly? No commentary, just quick, bam, boom. All right, I see Keith.
Okay, this is not in any specific order nor any specific precedence here, but I've got 17 different things that came up here. So salary increases and the lack of them, lack of shared governance, decreasing quality of healthcare. I mean, that's specifically the amount of money our administration doesn't put into things, sabbaticals, pension issues, and refusal to put more money into the pension plans, invisibility of ourselves to the Board of Trustees, lack of respect from our administration, salary compression, declining number of tenure track positions at our college, overemphasis on DEI initiatives, mental health issues and concerns, poor advising by staff to students, no uniform administrative staff policy. I mean, we don't have that specific in mind for certain policies in certain departments or divisions. Lack of administration's ability to answer our questions, no standardized independent study, directed study, and more of a 1960s thinking about computing at the college. I mean that now there seems to be more of a trend toward actually having students write things down rather than go ahead and write things on laptops. And I got down to retention at the school, and there are more I know, but that was the 17 I came up with in the time I had available. Thanks everybody for listening.
Yeah, nice. All right, show of hands, how many heard at least one thing that is a problem on your campus? All right, everybody. Was it the 1960s computers? I'm very curious about that. I like the idea of administrators saying, guess what we're bringing back? Computers the size of rooms.
Well,
it's gonna get butts in seats.
Yeah, to expand on that briefly, they want to go ahead and put laptops into every student's hands. I'm not sure that's the greatest idea anymore. Recent theory says it actually helps retention and student thinking ability to go ahead and write things down rather than go ahead and type things on laptops.
There is something in the embodied magic of writing things down to retention. I think that's probably right. Okay, well, thank you everyone for doing that. We're going to keep that list. Don't go throw it away. You're going to use it here in a little bit. All right, and I hope what you found in doing that is that you ran out of space, or there were just so many things it was hard to even whittle them down. Okay, so I'm hoping that that can be demonstrated. It's just there are so many things that we could be organizing around, right? No, I don't want any of you to come to me later after this training and say, gee, Mike, I really want to do this work, but man, we're just having, we're treated so well on our campus. I think in fact, we're just going to disband the chapter, we pack it up, we've done our work. All right, I assume that's not true for any of you. Okay, so let's talk a bit more about organizing issues. So we know the distinction between a problem and an issue. A problem is a problem and an issue is a solution to that problem. But let's say a bit more about issues. In addition to just being a solution, organizing issues need to be specific. Okay? We don't want to launch a campaign for vague reasons, because that's a quick way to fail. It's a quick way to lose track of what you're doing, and you are going to quickly run out of momentum. Okay, so an organizing issue is a specific, tangible. By tangible, I just mean like real. I don't mean like necessarily physical. Okay, but a real improvement in the lives of faculty that addresses or solves that problem in some way. Okay? Specific, tangible, and addresses the problem. And one thing we often run into when we're thinking about campaigns and in this initial planning phase is that we get confused. We confuse problems and issues we confuse problems, goals, and issues with each other. Okay, and we're going to talk a bit. Let's give some examples here, right? So we think a problem, right? And we say, oh, here's a problem. Well, let's campaign around that. Or we have a goal. Let's campaign around that goal. Okay, but we're not actually talking about issues. Second consideration, in addition to being a specific improvement that in some way addresses the problem, an organizing issue needs to be something that can be won from somebody else. Okay? If we could just do it on our own as faculty or in our chapter, it might be a very valuable, worthwhile thing to do, but it is not an issue campaign. Okay? An issue campaign needs to be won from somebody who would otherwise not give it to us. Right? If the status quo prevails, we're not going to get it, so we have to do something about it. So in other words, it's external to the chapter. Okay, and we're going to talk about some examples of things that might be very valuable to do, but aren't issue campaigns. Okay, so issue campaigns need to, number one, be specific. Number two, need to in some way address or solve the problem. And number three, need to be external from us, need to be something we can win from somebody else. All right, we're going to work through some examples here. So I encourage folks who are comfortable with doing so, please use the raise hand function. Okay, we're going to do a little bit of Socratic method here. Okay, I try to avoid it, but I think it makes sense for this activity. And I'm going to put up something that I'm giving you the answer up front, right? It's not an issue campaign. It's not a good issue, okay? And the thing you have to do is answer why not, all right? So here's the first one. More state appropriations. Why is this not a good issue? Feel free to use the raise hand function in the chat so I can see it pop up. Why is more state appropriations not an issue? And I'm going to prioritize folks who haven't had a chance to speak yet. All right, I see Jessica Young.
It's not specific, right? Appropriations for what specifically?
Right, it's too vague, okay? It's a problem, right? We lack appropriations, okay? But simply saying we want more, it's not specific. So here's what that could look like reframed into an organizing issue. We want to convince lawmakers to increase public education funding by 5% in the next legislative session. That is specific. It addresses the problem of lack of appropriations, and it's external. Okay, it hits all three of those categories. All right, next, increase membership levels by 10% in the chapter. Why is this not an organizing issue? Christina.
It's something we can do ourselves.
Yes, exactly. This is a very good example of something that you should do, right? This is not something you should avoid, okay? But it's not external to the chapter, right? So you can't, it's not something that could be won from somebody else. You could just do this, right? You could just go door knocking and asking people to join the chapter, and eventually you're going to get a 10% increase in membership. So how might this be reframed into an organizing issue? What if we instead addressed, this is just a made up example, excessive teaching requirements in the chemistry department. Now, why is this, how is this connected to a membership level increase? Well, the best way to recruit new members is to take on problems they care about. So the idea here would be, well, if we mounted a campaign to address this longstanding overwork issue in the chemistry department, that will help us recruit more chemistry department faculty and probably other faculty too who see what we're doing. And that's a way to achieve that 10% membership increase goal. Yeah. And in fact, the best membership drives are not done in a vacuum. They're done in relation to some other campaign you're doing. You can do them in a vacuum, right? You can have a clipboard and go door to door and ask people to join AAUP, and you're probably going to find some people who are ready to do it. But you're going to have a stronger campaign and a stronger recruitment effort if you can connect it to something else your chapter's doing. You should join us because we're trying to address this longstanding problem in the chemistry department, right? It's a much stronger ask of someone than you should join AAUP because John Dewey was cool, right? It's a bit of a different conversation. What about this one? We want to change institutional culture towards racial justice. Chris.
This is a problem, not an issue.
Exactly. It's a problem, not an issue. And it's also too vague. Again, it's not specific, right? So you're absolutely right. It's a problem, right? As many campuses around this country are facing right now, we got a lot of racist administrators, racist building names, right? Lack of resources for BIPOC students. So here's a way to reframe this into an issue campaign. Let's pressure the university president to fund a new initiative centered on supporting BIPOC students. Now, this is still a little vague because it's a made-up example, right? But if you have a specific thing on your campus that maybe your Black Student Association has been fighting for, or there's something that faculty have wanted for a long time related to BIPOC concerns and racial justice, that could be your issue campaign, right? And in so doing, you will address the culture in a small way, right? But in an important way, begin addressing the institutional culture to be closer towards racial justice, right? It's solving the problem in some way. It's not going to solve the whole problem, right? But it's a step in the direction. All right, what if we want to lower reliance on adjunct labor? Why is this not an issue campaign? Denise. Sorry, you're on mute, Denise.
It doesn't really propose any kind of solution, does it? I mean, it kind of names a problem.
Exactly. It names a problem, there's no solution, and there's also no way to measure this. Like, how do you know you've done this, right? How do you know you've lowered reliance on adjunct labor? How can you claim victory, right? So you're exactly right. It just names a problem, it's too vague, there's no success number, and so a way to reframe this would be, let's increase tenure track appointments by 10% over the next 2 years. Okay. So it's addressing the problem of an over-reliance on adjunct labor. It's not the only way to address that problem, of course, right? But it's one way to address that problem, and it's specific. All right, and then, so we have 2 more to get through here. What about, we want to bring more non-tenure track faculty into the chapter? Mindy.
External.
Yep, all right, yes. So it's, again, it's not external, okay? It's something you should do, okay? Again, I want to emphasize that you shouldn't avoid doing this, but it's not external. So I'm going to ask you now that you're becoming experts, what might be a way to reframe this into an issue campaign? How would we actually get adjunct faculty into the chapter? Chris, you want to give it a shot?
Maybe convince administrators to reduce teaching loads or service duties for some branch of the non-tenure track faculty.
Yeah. So this is, I have a different example, but it's there's more than one way to do this, right? So your answer is exactly correct. The answer is, just like with the chemistry folks, let's take on an issue that adjunct non-tenure track faculty care about. Right? I hear from chapters all the time, oh, we have such a hard time recruiting adjunct faculty. They're afraid, right? They're hard to track down. And that's all true. But have you actually tried fighting for something that matters to non-tenure track faculty? Right? I guarantee if you do that and step up, they will see it and they will see that you're acting in solidarity with non-tenure track faculty, and they will come. All right, and finally, I'm just going to go through this one rather than, because I think you're all getting the point. Reduce the power of private donors. Okay? The problem, of course, is that that's a goal. That's something we want to achieve, but it's not a specific issue, right? How do we go about reducing the power of private donors on campus? Well, one possible solution, and again, there's many others, would be let's get 2 seats for faculty on the board of trustees, right? Let's increase faculty input and voice at the board level. I mean, good luck with that. That's going to be quite the fight, I think, but that's one solution. So what I hope you're taking away from this chart is the importance of, before you even talk to, or rather before you even go to an administrator making a demand for something, you need to be really tight and specific on what it is you're asking for. Okay? Because that's how you're going to bring people in. And that's how you're going to actually build power. And that's how you're actually going to solve, or at least partially solve, the problem. So I have a couple examples, real life examples here. Okay, and there's actually a couple people in the audience from one of these chapters, okay, who've been doing this work and been doing it well. So here's an example of a current campaign that faculty are working on today. Like, this is happening right now. At the University of South Carolina, Columbia, big state school, right to work state, no unions, relatively new chapter, okay? Decent membership number for a large state school, right? Circling around 50, I think it was, maybe more than that now. And they have a problem. And their problem is there's a lack of budget transparency, right? We're not if you experience this too on your campus, right? Lack of budget transparency. So how do we address this? Well, they had a long process of planning and discussion, engaging members, and they came up with a solution. And the solution was, let's update the faculty handbook to create elected unit level budget committees that have minimum standards for access to financial information. Okay? It's one possible solution among others. I think another example of something that we talked about with this chapter was simply increasing the power of the Faculty Senate Budget Committee at the full Senate level, right? What if we did that? And we went through a process and the decision was made that this makes more sense. We're going to focus on this. So notice they have a problem and a very specific solution. Another chapter, another Southern, well, less Southern than South Carolina, but still, I think you could make the argument, okay? But certainly a right to work chapter, and certainly a university with deep, deep influence by conservative donors, George Mason. George Mason AAUP had a problem. Their president resigned, and they had a new presidential search. And the Board of Trustees made it clear that this presidential search was going to be closed and the faculty would have next to zero input on deciding the new president. So what did they do? They made a campaign. And their solution was to require all finalists in the presidential, once they were down to the finalists, those candidates would have to present to the entire faculty senate and answer questions. Okay. So it's not a fully transparent presidential search, right? It's not, a revolution in terms of changing the power relationships between the board and the faculty, but it's one way to increase transparency in a closed presidential search. And I will say they were partially successful. They got not the full faculty senate, but a subgroup of faculty senators could interview the finalist candidates was the result of their campaign. Those are just 2 examples. Okay. We're going to have our first breakout today. And here's what you're going to do. I'm going to post a link momentarily in chat that's going to take you to a spreadsheet, everyone's favorite. Okay. I'm going to put you into breakout rooms. And what you're going to do, and actually, I'll tell you what, I will just share with you what that spreadsheet looks like so that this actually makes sense. Let's do it this way. There we go. So the spreadsheet's going to look like this. Okay. What you're going to do in your group is on this first column, all those problems you listed before, you're going to list them here. Okay, all those problems. Okay, maybe don't put all 17. Maybe keep it to the 5 or 6 big ones. Just so this doesn't get huge. And then what you're going to do in your group is talk about possible solutions. Right? What are I put 3 columns here. You could add more if you come up with a bunch of solutions. Okay? But for example, if we put here closed presidential search, okay, one solution might be faculty senate interviews. Okay? Another solution might be more faculty on search committee. Okay? So in your small groups, your mission is to list out the problems and then think through possible solutions. They don't have to be perfect. Okay? They don't have to be ideal, but just think about what are some possible solutions to this. So let me share that link now. One second. Of course, Google Docs likes to be slow. There we go. So you should be able to follow this link. And let's see, there are 13 of you besides me. So I think that means for a 12. Yeah, we could do groups of 4, and I think that'd be fine. And you'll note on this spreadsheet, which if you're opening it up, hopefully you can see it, there are tabs at the bottom for different groups. When you go to your breakout room, be sure to note which group you're being sent to. Should be a number between 1 and I think 3, just because there's not that many. Okay, and use that tab. Because there's only 14 of us, it shouldn't be an issue, but just keep that in mind. Okay, in the chat, quick, 1 to 5 on understanding of the instructions. A 1 is I am very confused and would like that to be repeated. A 5 is I got it, let's get started. Okay, I'm saying mostly 5s, but a couple of folks could use a re-explanation. So to re-explain, you're going to follow that link with your small group in that spreadsheet. On the first column that says problems, you're going to list all those problems, or at least some, that you listed before when we had that individual right section. In your small group, once everyone's done that, you are then going to have a conversation about thinking through possible solutions to those problems. And I would encourage you, if shared problems emerge, right? If lack of budget transparency, for example, is something everyone has, maybe focus on that one, okay? And think about what are possible concrete solutions to that problem. All right, does that help? Okay, so here we go, breakout rooms. Okay, welcome back for real this time. Sorry about that. Lesson learned, be sure to double check the time in the breakout rooms before you launch them. Right. Educational for me as well. All right, so good work. I'm looking at these spreadsheets. Looks like we had some good discussions. If you didn't get as far as you had hoped, or if you're not satisfied, it's fine, right? You're not being graded on this, and this work is hard, right? And it's time consuming, and it takes some pretty intense intellectual labor, which is a great segue to our next section here. Because this is not something you should do by yourself. This is something that should be done collectively. So as I mentioned at the beginning, what we're doing here today is a bit of an artifice, okay? It's rushed, it's smaller scale, okay? You should use the issue identification process itself as an opportunity for organizing and growing your chapter, okay? So how do we do that? Well, I want to start with a question. Now that you all have thought of some solutions, why don't you just go back to your campuses and go pass a resolution and be done? Chris, yeah.
Because it doesn't work. My institution just passed a resolution about increased salaries 161 to 1, which did not really lead to any movement on the part of the administration.
Okay, yeah, so point number 1, Senate resolutions are non-binding and the administration can just, thumb their nose at you. What about this? What's the second reason, Mark?
Well, and it's connected to the first, which is it doesn't help us build power, right? Which is what's the only thing that's going to be effective in getting them to actually listen to what we propose or what we pass.
Yes, exactly right. So number 1, a Senate resolution is not going to be effective. And number 2, if we just did that, right, We're not actually engaging with faculty and recruiting more members and talking to people and doing tactics. And that's not a campaign, right? That's just a Senate action, which isn't to say it's a bad thing. Okay. But Joan, do you have another thought?
Well, yeah, I mean, I was just going to say, like before, didn't you talk about going outside of existing power structures? And the faculty senate is one of the existing power structures that is ostensibly engaged in shared governance, whether or not that actually is true. It's one of the existing power structures.
That's right. Yes. So, you know, we'll talk when we get to strategic planning and the more campaign side of things next time about how to interact with your Senate and how Senates can be useful allies in an organizing campaign for sure. Okay. But remember the difference between advocacy and advocacy and organizing. Okay. We don't just want to go to the true believers. We don't just want to go to the people in the Senate who already agree with us and get a vote that passes. We want to talk to people and build power among those who aren't engaged. Right? The people who aren't the ones doing all the work already. Member power is what matters. Because winning an issue campaign has two dimensions. First, there's the external component. Getting the thing you want, right? All those solutions you listed, those are the external component to a campaign. How do we get raises? How do we get better contracts for adjunct faculty? Okay? That's the thing you're trying to win. Okay? The alienated object from you. Okay? But then there's the internal component of an organizing campaign, which is growing your chapter and developing your culture of organizing. These things, sorry for like the weird Marxist terms, but these things are dialectical. They're connected, right? You can't do one without the other. Okay? And the synthesis is a campaign, right? So both of these are important, and everything we talk about going forward is going to impinge on both of these. It's going to be very difficult for you to win the external victories if you don't grow and if you don't recruit members and build power. It's going to be very difficult for you to recruit members and build power if you're not reaching for and trying to win things that matter to people. And when viewed in this way, no campaign is ever a failure. If your campaign is for 30% raises, let's say you're shooting for the stars here, right? 30% raises for all faculty, and you don't win that. And in fact, let's say you get crushed by the administration, like you get nowhere for a year. But if during that time you've recruited 100 new members to your chapter, if faculty are engaged in ways they weren't before, if you've had conversations with faculty to find out what they care about, at the end of that means at the end of that campaign, your chapter is stronger than it was going into it. So the next fight you take on, you'll begin in a much better position. So take heart, even if you don't win the thing you want, you're still going to have a stronger chapter. Going back to the example of George Mason, they didn't win what they wanted. They did not get a fully transparent presidential search. They got a small subgroup of the Senate was able to go interview candidates. The Board of Trustees didn't want that, right? They had to wrench that from their cold claws, their Koch-funded clause. But at the end of the campaign, they had a chapter that was now over 150 members when it started at 30. Okay, and they're much more active and effective now to take on, and that set them up to take on COVID fights, you name it. So issue identification is an opportunity to build membership. The issue should not be dictated, although I realize what I'm encouraging you to do after today is go back to your chapter and say, hey, guess what, everybody? I got the solution to our problem. Let's do it. Okay. You can maybe start with that, right? But don't end with that. Your issue should not be dictated by the chapter leadership. Otherwise, you're missing the opportunity to engage with members and recruit them to the fight and recruit them to the campaign itself. Now, ultimately, or at the end of the day, somebody's got to make a call, a judgment call, right? Somebody's got to say, here's what we're fighting for, here's what we're not going to fight for, right? That has to happen. And that's probably going to be a smaller group than the entire membership of the faculty. But before that happens, you got to do something. You have to engage with people. You have to talk to them. You have to have listening sessions, consultations, participation in the process, right? How do we actually bring members into these conversations where we're talking about problems, issues, solutions, and campaigns? because that's all going to help you do that second part of a campaign. Recruit more members, build more power, bring people into the fight. So what are some specific things you can do, right? These are some ideas you can take home with you today, put them in the bank. Well, the best thing, and this is something in our final session of the training we're going to talk about extensively, this is the gold standard, is one-on-one conversations. Talking to other faculty and asking them, what do you care about? Remember that question we started with? If you could wave a magic wand, what's one thing you would fix? That's what we're doing here, is we want to talk to faculty and get them to start thinking, if I could just change it, right? What would that change look like if I had, the ability to do so? And of course, the solution is not magic. The solution is collective action. You could do a faculty-wide survey on issues that people care about. The chapter can just do this, right? Find somebody who has the list of all your faculty, right? Have a friendly administrator or someone on the Senate, or do some legwork and go scroll through your faculty directory, right? And build that email list and send out a survey. Say, the AAUP chapter, we're doing a survey. The administration won't like it, but that's tough, right? They can just deal with it. You could host town halls, right? You could have a big meeting on Zoom or in person, perhaps, now if things opening up and it's safe. Invite faculty. We're going to talk about the issues we face and the problems we face, and we want to hear from you, right? Your voice matters. And of course, the issue sometimes chooses you. And this is something we've seen a lot of over the last couple of years, is you have to react to something the administration's doing, right? Program cuts, faculty layoffs, et cetera. And that's also okay, right? If there's something that's really got faculty motivated and fired up, take advantage of that. Make that your campaign. Oops. Or you could do a combination of these things, or you are all very creative people. You can come up with your own ideas. Okay, these are just some things to get you started. How do we engage with members? Well, you can talk to them, do a survey, have some town halls, see what things people already care about, or are there some problems on the horizon that we see coming down the pike that we know we should react to? Start building a campaign now. So sorry to keep picking on South Carolina, but they're a great set of folks down there in Dixie, and they did some good issue identification work over the last couple of years. So there is a group of chapters, Beaufort, Aiken, Columbia, and Upstate in the University of South Carolina system. They're all advocacy chapters. Some are much smaller than others, right? They're all kind of regional. And this group decided, what if we got together to try to build a campaign, something we could all get behind? Yeah. So this group built up some organizing teams on their campuses. And last academic year, they sent a survey to all faculty, all their members, and as many other emails as they could get of faculty at their campuses. And afterwards, they held an all faculty meeting, right, of the entire system. So just to give you some idea what the survey, there were 245 respondents across the system. 31% were currently AAUP members. So here's just some data from that survey if you're curious. Oops, there we go. And then once they had this survey, which they put out for several weeks, I think a couple months, in fact, they then, as a team, collated that information, went through the data, and held, almost just about a year ago to the day, coming up in May, a system-wide meeting that was open to all faculty, not just AAUP members. It was attended by 80 people from all the different campuses. And in that meeting, there we go. You can see my face there in the top left. At that meeting, they presented the data from the survey. The organizers and the activists, the chapters had done some work, as I mentioned, to go through the data, to sort it, to organize it. And then there were these great breakout room discussions where faculty talked about, among these 5 issues, you see here, money, contingent faculty, diversity, equity, and inclusion, working conditions, shared governance, right? Which one do you want us to focus on? Which one makes sense? Where do you want to see changes? And faculty were able to have a conversation. They recorded that information in a Google form so that the chapter leaders and activists had access to it afterwards. And where they landed was budget transparency, right? After a long process here, they decided, look, the thing that unites us is budget transparency. Let's try to build a campaign where we work together to have more budget transparency. So this is just an example of a process you could replicate, or parts of it, to engage with members and faculty in the issue identification work itself. So the takeaway pointer is that it's important to be methodical in the issue identification process. You don't want to just jump the gun and say, here's what we're doing, everybody, and think it's going to work. You got to be thoughtful, strategic when you identify your issues, because you want to make sure you win, right? You want to win the issue, of course, but you also want to grow your chapter and build its power in the process. If at the end of the day, here's a thesis for today. If you go back to your campus and you do a Senate resolution demanding X, Y, and Z solution, and you actually win it, but you haven't done anything to grow your chapter, you haven't recruited new members, you haven't gotten access to other departments, I would call that a failed campaign, right? I mean, it's a victory for sure, and you could put that feather in your cap and you can use that in future fights, right? You should claim victory for sure. But it's a missed opportunity. So maybe failure is the right word. It's a missed opportunity, right? It could have been so much more. And I encourage you to start thinking in those ways. And the issue identification process is the first step in involving members and recruiting non-members. At every step of the process of building a campaign, we should be asking ourselves, who else should be in this room? How do we engage more people? How do we recruit more people in this process? Okay, so I'm looking at the time. We have about a half hour left, so this should be fun. We've talked about issues, we've talked about problems, we've talked about how to engage members in the issue identification process. You've done some work in small groups with developing potential solutions to several problems. We are now going to talk about how do you decide between competing issues, right? Or competing solutions, to be more specific. Because just as there's a million problems, there's also several possible solutions to all those problems. So how do you pick? How do you make that judgment call? How do you decide? Well, you have to ask yourself, what's a good organizing issue? Because of course, there's limitless possible things you could do, but only some of those are good. And there's, we're gonna operationalize good here. And how do you adjudicate between competing priorities? Okay, how do you make that judgment call? So here's some criteria for an organizing issue. There are others, but this is some of the basic stuff. Well, your issue, is it widely felt? Is it something lots of faculty feel? And would they feel the victory? Is it deeply felt? Is it something that faculty feel at their core, that this is something that they would really, if we won this issue, is it something that they would really impact them in a meaningful way? Is there someone who could give it to us? Is there a clear decision maker? If our demand is, if our campaign is for, I don't know, dissolving the university, I don't know, I'm just throwing it out there, right? There probably is some person out there who give us that, but it's not entirely clear, right? If that's our demand, right? Or something, we want to go to the moon, right? Okay, well, can your president get you to the moon? I don't know. Maybe if they have close ties to Elon Musk, maybe you could get there, but I doubt it. Will the issue actually result in a real improvement in the lives of faculty? Right? Is it something that they're going to feel day to day, that they'll actually be able to point to and say, oh yeah, this is different than it was before? Will it make people aware of their own power? Right? Will the campaign actually bring faculty together and help them realize when we stand together, we can make serious changes? Will winning require you to expand your chapter? This is a really important question. We don't really want to take on fights that we could probably just do right now with the group that we have. We want to stretch a little. Okay? Challenge yourself to think about, could we recruit enough people to win this if we wanted to? After the campaign, if you win, will the relations of power be different than they were before between faculty and the administration? Just like how with a union, a lot of the power of a strike comes from the threat of the strike, okay? The power of an advocacy chapter comes from the threat, the realistic, legitimate threat of escalation. the most powerful advocacy chapters out there often don't actually have to do a lot because they have waged campaigns in the past that demonstrate to the administration that the chapter has the power to mobilize faculty and take action and make their lives and make administrators' lives miserable for a while. That just the threat of the chapter taking action is enough. Okay. So will this campaign get you closer to that ideal, right? Will your administration have to take you more seriously after this campaign? And is it winnable? Right? This is a conversation I know many of you probably had in your discussion groups, right? Is this actually realistic? Now, I want to encourage you not to negotiate with yourselves and your chapter members up front too much on this, but it is important to take stock, right? Can we actually win 30% raises for all faculty with a chapter that we have currently, right? You have to be realistic. And then there's several other criteria. Does it have a timeline that works for you? Will it be non-divisive? Will it help you build leadership? Will it set you up for the next campaign? Will it be consistent with your values and your mission? And is it easy to understand? And there are lots of other criteria we could add here. So these are the questions you should ask yourself when you're comparing different possible campaigns, right? 30% raises, to keep using this example, is going to be widely felt, and it's going to be deeply felt, right? No issue is more widely or deeply felt than more money. But is it winnable, right? Is it non-divisive? Will it actually help you build leadership? And maybe it will, and maybe even though you can't win it, you decide to do the campaign anyway because you know it's going to get people energized, and that's a decision you have to make. Versus maybe a less exciting campaign to, you know, again, sorry to pick on South Carolina, but to have more budget committees at the unit and department level. You know, is that going to blow the socks off of people when you tell them in the same way raises would? Probably not, right? But it satisfies other criteria that perhaps you decide are more important. Okay, so here we are now. We're going to do a second breakout room. And this one, we don't have 40 minutes. We'll try to do 25. I want this to be kind of long. And here's what we're going to do. In your breakout rooms, let me share. Sorry, let me just get my other thing here. I'm going to link you to yet another spreadsheet. Okay? And in your same groups, here's what I want you to do. On each, just like before, there will be a tab for every group. Okay. So if this is group 1, for example, what I want you to do is take those solutions you talked about before. So I'm just looking at group 1 here. Okay, a no shared governance, committee mirror plan. I don't exactly know what that means. I assume people in group 1 know what that means. I want you to go ahead and copy it and put it onto this one. Okay. Do that for, let's say, 2 or 3 of the big solutions you came up with, right? The ones that you that felt like the best, right? So if we go back to the other spreadsheet, right? What if we say more faculty on a search, or more faculty on a search committee? Okay. So now we have 2 possible issue campaigns in front of us. What if committee mirror plan, which is a solution to lack of shared governance, or faculty on a search committee for presidential searches? What I want you all to do is then go through this rubric. Okay? Ask yourself, is this going to be widely felt? Is it going to be deeply felt? Is it non-divisive? Is there a clear decision maker? Blah, 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 blah. And do that for each of your issues. And if you can get to it, we'll see on time, right? Make a decision as a group. Among these issues that we've now analyzed in detail, which one is best? Which one are we going to pick if we were a chapter to make our campaign out of? Okay. All right. Again, quick 1 to 5 in chat. 5 being, I got it, let's do it. 1 is, what are you talking about? I should also probably have the link for you. That would be good. Okay, I see a lot of 5s. I see a 4. So for the 4s, I will trust your other group members to fill you in because 4 is pretty high. So here is the link. I'm going to do breakout rooms, and we're going to make these 25 minutes. So I'm going to put you all back in your breakout rooms. All right, and we're going to pick an issue. Sound good? All right. Okay, welcome everyone. I think several people were cut off there. I apologize. Even 25 minutes never seems like enough time. And again, going back to the prior section of the presentation, this is not something you should do in 25 minutes. This is something that should be done over several meetings, engaging members, etc. So is there any group that actually reached a final decision where you said, this is what we're going with? Okay, that's fine. That's okay, right?
Chris, I think we did, didn't we?
Or did you?
In the end, we did finally come to a decision, I think.
All right, what was it? What did you choose?
We chose, so the issue was creating a standardized process for the creation of new programs. Now, this is our attack on lack of transparency, essentially.
Okay, so that's a solution to lack of transparency,
Yes.
right? It's one way to approach that problem, and we're going to create a standardized process for new programs. That's great. Again, these things don't need to be, it's St. Patrick's Day. We can be a little lewd. These things don't need to be sexy, right? They don't need to be, they're blowing people's socks off and totally getting people out on the barricades, right? But they need to be something that matters, and that matters, right? And you're not going to recruit everybody with that pitch, but if you can win that fight, if you can get that, then you can go on the next campaign and say, look what our chapter has done. Things look this way prior to our chapter, and things look better after our chapter. Okay, so I know it's past 5. We are beyond time. So if you got to go, you got to go. Thanks for your attention. Last thing I just want to say is, just to wrap up here, today we focus on the difference between problems and issues. We talked about how to engage members in the issue identification process. And finally, how do you adjudicate and make a decision between competing issues and competing solutions, competing priorities? Next time, we are going to take these issues you identified, right? And we're going to begin thinking about how do we develop a plan to win this thing? How do we actually build the power and put pressure on key decision makers to get this? Okay. Because you might be looking at your issue and think, boy, that would be awesome. I know there was a lot of questions in this breakout rooms about winnability, right? How do we actually win this? What we're going to focus on next time are the steps you take to win. There's never guarantees, of course, right? But we're going to talk about how do you build tactics, how do you build a timeline, how do you identify your key decision makers, all that fun stuff. That'll be Friday, April 15th from 3 to 5 p.m. Eastern. So go ahead and put that in your calendar. I will also send an invite like before. All right, everyone. Thanks for your attention. Have a fun weekend. Enjoy yourselves, and I will see you all soon.
Okay.